what's coming out. Court, all rise, please. The Honorable Judge Mark is now presiding. Courtroom 808 is now in session. You may be seated. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, we are on Commonwealth v. Aaron Hernandez, docket number 14-10417, and docket number 15-10384. This matter is scheduled for motion hearing. Will the parties please identify themselves for the record?
Good morning, Your Honor. Patrick Hagan for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Your Honor. Teresa Anderson for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Your Honor. Mark Lee for the Office of the District Attorney.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jose Baez on behalf of Mr. Hernandez.
Ronald Sullivan for Mr. Hernandez. George Leontire for Mr. Hernandez.
All right. Good morning, all. We have a series of motions to deal with previously filed, and I see that we have some motions filed today as well. And in terms of the sequence of events today, what seems to make sense to me is first to deal with motions relating to so-called jail calls, that is, interception of recorded conversations of Mr. Hernandez while in custody. The defendant had filed two motions in that regard, one relating to disclosure of any improper accessing of those calls through Bristol County or Suffolk County sheriffs or through Department of Corrections, and the second, a Rule 17 motion focused on, I take it it's the third-party vendor, Securus Technologies. As to those motions, I issued an order relating to the state officials, that is, the two sheriff's offices and Department of Corrections, and I think it would be appropriate to take that up in the first instance. That may actually resolve the second motion. We'll see. After we deal with that issue, then it would seem to me appropriate to take up the motion to suppress identification or motions relating to the Commonwealth's notice or motion in limine for an in-court identification of the defendant, and thereafter take up the motion to suppress the contents of the defendant's cell phone. We then have some discovery-related motions to deal with, and I see today the defendant has filed a motion to continue the trial date, and we will take that up. Mr. Baez, it seems to me the other motions that you filed today really are trial-related motions that we can deal with as we go along.
Many of which are, yes, sir.
Okay. Does that seem like the appropriate way to proceed today?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We would have no issue with that.
Okay. Well, let's deal first, if we can, then, with the defendant's motion for discovery related to breach of defendant's telephone security and recording attorney-client privilege communications. And as to that motion, I've thought a little bit about how that impacts this case. And it would impact this case, it would seem to me, and I'll hear, Mr. Baez, if you think there's broader implications, but it would seem to me to impact this case insofar as there was any government-involved intrusion into telephone security, such that there would be a claim of prosecutorial misconduct. I don't see that that is what is alleged in the pleadings, but it seems to me, if that occurred, you have a right to know about it. And then secondly, perhaps a somewhat broader issue as to whether any attorney-client communications were, in fact, recorded, and if so, whether the Commonwealth has had access to those communications or anyone else, such that that could impact the defendant's Sixth Amendment right to counsel. Now, do you see other concerns that we have to address in the context of this case.
The only thing that I would add to perhaps the court's list would be that which might include in some misconduct by law enforcement that would have ultimately affected any search warrants that were issued in this case, thereby taking us to suppression issues. You're correct in the assumption, in the evaluation of there is the possible prosecutorial misconduct, but we're not in the business of slinging mud without, of course, anything to back that up.
No, and you haven't done that at all. You've cast no aspersion on the government's involvement in any improper hacking or access to the defendant's calls. I raise it only because it would seem to me that is one way that it is or could be a relevant issue to this particular case. And by that I mean that if there was hacking, independent, without any involvement of government or of the Commonwealth or of the police, then your remedy is civil in nature. It doesn't seem to me it would affect this case.
It is, however, unless, of course, it turns out that the person who made, the independent person who's hacking is a potential witness in this case, or someone who may have fed law enforcement information. We are aware that there is an anonymous call in this case that was later discovered not to be anonymous. I'm not saying that that's the individual in any way, shape, or form. But there are...
An anonymous call to whom?
To law enforcement in reference to this case.
In relation to jail recordings?
No. There was an anonymous call that, of course, explained to law enforcement that the Fall River case and this case were connected by the same individual. In addition to that, that specific call was utilized in, I think, a majority of all of the search warrants that were issued in this case. What's really important to note for consideration of these issues would be that this investigation unfolded simultaneously to the arrest in the Fall River case. So any calls that were being made, any discussions that were being made between Mr. Hernandez and counsel or any other individuals would have been discussing both cases potentially in light of the fact that it became public rather quickly that Suffolk County was investigating Mr. Hernandez for another possible crime. So I think while we'd love to parse out one case from the other, both investigations really took off at or about the same time. So that's why these calls are directly related to this case, and that's why we think that it's our obligation to investigate and leave no stone unturned, especially after something that's so fundamental, such as the constitutional concerns that the court is going to be looking into.
In connection with your motion for discovery relating to telephone security and accessing the phone calls, I issued an order on December 9 ordering the sheriffs and the Department of Correction to produce and to be present to produce call logs and records relating to the defendant, indicating the date and time of any telephone calls, the numbers dialed, and the length of the call. Records including any documentation relating to requests for inmate telephone records of the defendant, and records reflecting authorized or unauthorized access to recorded communications of the defendant. And it's my understanding that someone has appeared here today, I don't know whether someone is from Bristol, Suffolk, or DOC, with records. Mr. Hagan, have you received them?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Baez, have you received those records?
Actually, I'd like to defer to Mr. Millionaire. He's the one handling the specific.
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. The only records we received we picked up yesterday in Suffolk, the Bristol Sheriff's Office told us that we couldn't pick up any records ahead of time. They were producing the hearing here today.
So you received yesterday Suffolk records?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the records delivered today are from whom?
Your Honor, I believe part of your order was also for the Commonwealth, being the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, to produce our own records of requests for calls
Yeah.
and what was returned from the various correctional facilities. We've provided that. That I believe is a large packet you have in front of you. We also have received from the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department a large packet that was referred to by counsel. We received that yesterday. The general counsel or legal counsel for the Sheriff's Department, Alan Forbes, is present with the records today as well, and can speak to the court as to what's contained there.
And Mr. Forbes is from which office?
Suffolk County Sheriff.
Suffolk County. And do we have a representative from Bristol County here today?
I was advised,
We
Your Honor,
do.
that a Nelson D. Casia from Special Investigations was on
Sir,
his way.
come on forward. Come forward if you would, sir. Would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Chief Nelson Vigavale from Special Investigations, employed by the Bristol County Sheriff's Office.
Can you spell your last name, please?
D-E, capital G, O-U-V-E-I-A.
And that was, I'm sorry, Nelson?
Nelson.
And was it Chief of Special Investigations?
Yes.
All right, sir, the court had issued an order December 9. I take it you're here today in response to that order.
Yes.
And have you brought with you any records of the Bristol County
I do,
Sheriff?
and I'll have them all here shortly. So they'll be all here.
Sorry. And the records that are coming here, will they comply with the scope of the order I had issued?
Yes.
Indicating calls placed, the numbers placed to?
Yes.
Okay. And ordinarily under Rule 17 of Rules of Criminal Procedure, a record keeper, a third-party record keeper, ought to have an opportunity to object to the production of records. Is that a matter that the Sheriff's Office has discussed or consulted with counsel on?
I haven't discussed anything with counsel.
Is the Bristol County Sheriff lodging any objection to the production
No,
of these records?
No.
Very good. And when you say the records will be here shortly, what does that mean? Are they coming by truck or?
Somebody's running them off from my office, sir.
Okay. And bring them into the courtroom?
Yes.
Very good. If you could just let the clerk or let the attorneys know when they are here.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, may I address the court?
Yes, sir.
At the last hearing, we discussed the fact, with respect to the third-party request, that we would have the opportunity today to try to determine whether or not the Sheriff's Department maintains the database or whether the database is maintained. So I hope we get an opportunity to inquire of the witnesses who produced the documents, the manner and other questions that we have with respect to this system.
All right.
that we use.
We can get to that shortly. With regard to Suffolk County, do we have a representative of the Suffolk County Sheriff? Good morning, sir.
Good
Would
morning.
you identify yourself?
My name is Alan Forbes.
Is that A-L-A-N?
L-L-E-N.
Ian. And Mr. Forbes, your position at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department?
I'm the general counsel.
Thank you. And Mr. Forbes, the court had issued an order December 9 relating to the production of calls of Mr. Hernandez and records relating to that. in connection with that order, are you prepared to produce records today?
Yes, I produced records to counsel, and I have the stuff in the court as well.
And is the Suffolk County Sheriff lodging any objection under Rule 17 to the production of these records?
No, we have no objection to the court's order to send it.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, don't go too far. You may be on the witness stand shortly. All right. Lastly, we have Department of Corrections. Do we have a representative of Department of Corrections here? Mr. Hagan, was DOC contacted?
They were not, Your Honor. I don't believe they were part of your order, but perhaps I missed that.
No, they were not part of the order. And I think, Mr. Leontire, that's because the motion was specifically addressed to the DA's office and to Suffolk County and Bristol County sheriffs.
It was, Your Honor, because it is our understanding, but I heard something different.
If that is where the accessing took place?
No, I heard something different, that I was told in writing by Securus that they do not service MCI Shirley, but I believe, Mr. Hagan said, it might be my misunderstanding, but I believe he said at the last hearing that they did. I don't know if he knows that or not.
Mr. Hagan, do you know one way or the other?
I don't, Your Honor, but I can find out.
All right, and you've received Suffolk County. One set. All right. Now, counsel, assuming that what has been provided is a complete index of all calls that were recorded and that lists the numbers called, it would seem to me that that would satisfy any disclosure as to whether or not attorney-client calls were recorded.
No, Your Honor.
Why not?
Because that's exactly what the problem has been with Securus, as I've noted in the initial memorandum. There are many situations where attorneys' calls are listed as not being recorded when in fact they are recorded. And the issue and the concern that we wanted to look at was the database to see if in fact these calls were recorded. And as I said last time.
And how would you propose to do that?
We have a forensics expert. And we would intend to go look at their database with a forensic expert. This is not that unusual. And try to determine if in fact from backup tapes, whether or not there were attorney calls that were recorded. There's another issue that we're going to get into today a little bit, which is the not just the recording of attorney calls, but the live ability within the sheriff's office to listen into any call, including attorney-client calls. So my concern is, yes, at least from the data that I have seen so far, but I was just given this this morning.
Yeah.
And I do have some of it from prior disclosure, but I have not seen yet, from a log point of view or from a call log point of view, any calls that I would classify as attorney-client privilege calls. That being said, I think the whole purpose is because this system has been hacked a think we provided more than sufficient foundation to show that Securus has been recording attorney calls, notwithstanding the do not call list. I cannot represent that that's occurred here in Suffolk or Bristol, but I know that it's occurred. And if in fact, which I believe is the case, the witnesses today tell us that their database, that they do not maintain their database, then they simply can't opine as to the validity of that database.
All right. So what do you want to do? You want to call a witness?
Yes, sir.
All right. Who do you want to call?
I'd like to call the representative from Sutton. No.
Mr. Forrest?
Go right this way. Stand right here, you're going to raise your right hand, you're going to face the mandatory.
You solemnly swear the testimony you shall give in the matter now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Right this way, sir.
Mr. Leontin.
Good morning, Mr. Forbes.
Good morning.
Please state your name for the record.
Alan Forbes.
And what is your position in the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office?
I'm a lawyer. I'm a general counsel at Suffolk County.
And as a lawyer and general counsel, do you have familiarity with the telephone system that is operated at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office?
I have some familiarity with it.
And does that familiarity include the nature of the database operation between Suffolk County and Securus?
I don't understand your question.
Do you know if the detainees' phone calls are maintained on a database within the Sheriff's Office, or if they are maintained on a database at Securus?
I believe the second thing is true. I think that Securus maintains a database of recorded calls.
Right. And in addition, when you receive a subpoena to produce detainees' calls, in fact, you refer that subpoena to Securus to prepare the call log to be presented pursuant to that subpoena. Is that correct?
That's part of the process, yes.
Could you tell me what the rest of the process is?
Sure. General counsel accepts subpoenas for records and for witnesses. The lawyer in the general counsel's office reviews the subpoena to make sure it's something that we're willing to comply with and don't want to move to quash. Then after that's okayed by a lawyer in the general counsel's office, it's sent over to the Sheriff's Investigative Division and to a representative Securus with the notion that that's okay, please collect these calls. Then a Securus representative collects the calls or the call log, whatever is required in the subpoena, and then contacts the law enforcement agency or the party who sent the subpoena and arranges for pickup.
Okay. And do you release prisoner call logs or prisoners' calls to anyone without a subpoena?
Is there anyone outside of the department?
Yes, sir.
No.
With respect to individuals within the department, can you tell me who has access to the Securus system?
Sure. All of the investigators in the SID, as it's called, have permission to get into that access and listen to calls. And some of the custody officers who are involved in things like gang intelligence, things like that, they also have access rights.
And could you tell me how many individuals that may involve?
I don't know. I think there's, I don't know, more than 6 investigators, and I'm not sure how many of the custody people. I'd say it's a handful.
Does the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office cooperate with local law enforcement with respect to providing intelligence or information from prisoners' calls, for example, detainees' calls?
In some cases, yes.
And that's without a subpoena?
I'm not sure exactly. I know that the gang intelligence people talk to people in Boston police. I don't know what the content of those conversations would be, though.
And, for example, the gang intelligence officers have a right to listen to conversations.
Yes.
in these conversations. And they have a right to do that both live during the conversation and after the conversation. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to your question.
Are you familiar with the reports that you provided today?
I've looked at them, yes.
Are you familiar with a Lieutenant Keith Medeiros?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was that name?
Lieutenant Keith Medeiros. And Mr. Medeiros is a lieutenant in the gang unit?
Yes, I believe so.
And are you familiar that Lieutenant Keith Medeiros accessed the Mr. Hernandez phone calls?
I am.
May I approach the witness room?
You may.
Could you identify the document that I just provided you?
Sure. This document has date stamp number SCSD number 33, and it appears to be a single-page report from Lieutenant Keith Medeiros to Assistant Superintendent Richard McCarthy.
Okay. And this report, does it mention monitoring that on July 14, 2014, while monitoring the system, I observed detainee Aaron Hernandez, number 147230, involved in an active phone call. Due to his alleged criminal activity in the Boston area, I began monitoring his phone calls for any and all possible intelligence related to criminal activity? Sure.
I think that's what Medeiros' report says, yes.
And does that not indicate to you, sir, that he, at least with respect to this lieutenant, that he in fact listens to the defendant's phone calls live?
He did that. That's what he says.
And you're not aware whether other members in the gang unit and other members who have access to the system have the same capability to listen to live phone calls?
I'm just not that familiar with what their access rights are. I see that Medeiros says that he did that. I assume that that's true.
You and I had a brief conversation about the records that you'd be supplying today, correct?
We did. I think we spoke Friday.
I appreciate that, first of all. Do you remember that I asked whether or not you could provide us with a record of everyone who has access to the secure system?
I remember you asked me for a couple of things, and I think you did ask for something like that.
Were you able to make a determination if such a record exists?
I didn't attempt to.
Because?
It was beyond the scope of the judge's order, and when I talked to the Securus technician about it, I did inquire about it, but he wasn't certain whether or not he would be able to give me a snapshot, if you will, of holders of access rights in July of 2014. So I let it rest there.
Did he mention whether you could give me a snapshot of who has access today?
I didn't ask him.
With respect to the operation of the secure system, is it the general policy of the Suffolk County Sheriff to monitor live the calls of inmates?
I think that's something that happens. But when you say, is it the policy, we don't have people sitting 24/7 listening to calls. If someone with the right to do some investigative work decides to listen to a call, it's my understanding that they're allowed to do that.
Are you aware if the system has what's called a flagging notice that will notify prison officials, sheriff's officials, that a particular inmate is making a call at a particular time, in live time?
That sounds familiar to me. I think we have that capability now. I can't swear that we had it in 2014.
Could you describe for me the information sharing that occurs between sheriff department employees and local law enforcement
Well,
as a result, pursuant to these kind of calls?
I need to be clear that what I'm testifying to is what I know from speaking to Securus. To the extent that you're asking me for things that were conveyed to me in the context of an attorney-client relationship, you get into a problem of privilege. I do have a witness from SID today that can talk about some of these other matters, so if you can ask the question again, I can answer it.
Okay. Are you familiar with the alleged strike? Are you familiar with the hacking that took place of Mr. Hernandez's phone calls in 2014?
It's my understanding that July 18th of 2014, an unauthorized person listened to several personal calls that Mr. Hernandez placed.
Did the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department communicate with Securus with respect to that hacking?
Yes.
And in fact, did the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office request that Securus undertake an investigation to determine how the phone was hacked?
We did a couple of things. So the incursion happened on the 18th, and it appears that the department became aware of it the following Monday. It was a Friday, so the 21st we became aware of it, and then we communicated with Securus to get a fix for the problem and figure out what happened.
And did Securus, and were you leading that investigation, sir?
No.
To your knowledge, did Securus and personnel from the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office in fact determine who hacked the system?
I don't think they knew at that time, and I don't know for sure that they know now. I can tell you that the person that improperly accessed the calls on the 18th of July 2014 used a login called install at Securus TX, and that caused us to believe that it was someone who had a set of Securus credentials, if you will, and used them to get into the database to listen to these personal calls.
Referring back to my question.
Yes.
About who has access to the Securus system. All right. Do you have any information as to the purging of former employees of the Bristol County Sheriff's Office from access to the Securus system?
Did you mean to say Suffolk?
I'm sorry, Suffolk.
Sure. So I don't... Purging from the system, can you tell me what you mean by that?
Well, if you have an employee who has access to the Securus system and has a login passcode, and that employee leaves the employment of the Sheriff's Office, is there a method whereby their access to the Securus system is terminated?
I don't have the answer to that. I think Mr. Dacey, who's here today, could probably help you with that.
And Mr. Dacey is whom?
Brian Dacey is the head of SID, the Sheriff's Investigative Division.
Are you aware that the hacking of Mr. Hernandez calls occurred on more than one occasion?
Can I check the records so I can answer your question? So I'm looking at...
Hold on just 1 second.
Sure, sorry.
Mr. Forbes.
So I'm looking at Securus document number 48, and it says that on 7/18 of 2014, install at Secure accessed 3 calls between 1456 and 1443.
Are you looking at the document dated July 21st, 2014, 7:47 a.m.?
I'm looking at Bates Securus number 48.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Could I refer you to this document that you produced? It's SCSD 000030.
Yep, I have it.
Okay. And in the first paragraph of this email from Brian, it's from Brian Dacey to Paul Vazzella.
Yes.
Can you identify those individuals for us?
Sure. Brian Dacey is the head of SID at Suffolk County Sheriff, and Paul Vazzella is one of the investigators who works in that division.
Okay. And in the first paragraph, it says, just checked Hernandez's phone calls, and an additional 3 calls were accessed on Friday. Have you provided us with any information about prior access calls?
I believe what Vazzella, the answer to your question is yes. I believe what Vazzella is referring to is the fact that Medeiros was listening to calls on the 14th, and then he says 3 additional. He's referring to install at Securus. Okay.
Of your own knowledge, do you have any knowledge of other breaches of Mr. Hernandez's phone calls into the Securus system?
That's all that I'm aware of.
You haven't done any independent evaluation yourself as to the number, the time of any breaches to Mr. Hernandez's cell calls?
I don't think that's completely correct. I looked at these documents that I produced to you yesterday, and so far as I can tell, there were 3 improper incursions into the database when install listened to 3 personal calls.
And is that what's referenced in this memorandum by Mr. Dacey?
That's Bates 30, yes, Your Honor.
Those are the 3 calls.
So those are the 3 improper calls.
So it's not accessing on 3 separate dates, each date perhaps with multiple calls.
That's correct. The email speaks to multiple dates, but those are the dates that Mr. Hernandez placed those calls.
Mr. Wood, you didn't do an analysis or request Securus to do an analysis of how many times Mr. Hernandez's phone calls were breached during the period that he was at Suffolk County.
No, I just asked for the complete call log, and I produced that.
That wasn't my question. My question was, did you investigate during the period that Mr. Hernandez was an inmate at Suffolk County the data to determine, other than these 3 calls, whether the system had been accessed?
I understand your question. I did not.
Thank you. Do you know if Officer Medeiros, Lieutenant, I think it was Medeiros, has any involvement in the Commonwealth versus Hernandez case?
I don't know anything about that.
Do you know if he's a witness?
I don't believe that he is.
So that I understand one more time, and I will be done with your testimony. Investigative officials within the Sheriff's Office, Suffolk County, can listen live to inmates' phone calls and can communicate without subpoena the information they glean therefrom to law enforcement officials.
Except I don't believe they get access to attorney-client calls.
That wasn't my question.
Well, you asked all calls, so it's a qualified yes.
Okay. I appreciate it. Do you know when an attorney-client privilege call is made, whether or not the individuals who have live access can listen to those calls?
It's my understanding that they do not have access.
Well, allegedly they're not taped, is that correct? They're not recorded.
They're not recorded.
If they're on a certain call list.
Yes.
But not recording, to your knowledge, also means that they do not have live access to that telephone call?
That's not what I think the phrase "not recorded" means. The calls are designated private, and it's my understanding from talking to Securus that if the call is designated private, it is not recorded and you can't access it. But that's just what Securus told me. I don't have personal knowledge of the way the database works. This is my understanding of how the system works.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Honor, could you call the technical person from Suffolk County?
Well, we will get to that in a minute. Does that conclude your examination?
Oh, this, please.
Okay. Any examination come on?
Your Honor, just one question. Good morning, Mr. Forbes.
Good morning.
Do you know whether or not there's any admonition that is given at the beginning of any phone call that an inmate in the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department makes that advises them whether their phone calls are subject to monitoring or recording?
Yes, I circulated to counsel yesterday a prompt that greets both the person placing the call and the person receiving the call, and advises them that the call that they're about to participate in is being recorded, and it says, I wrote it down so I could get it right, this call is being recorded and is subject to being monitored. If this is an attorney-client conversation, please hang up and call 617-704-6820. Once again, the phone call is being recorded. That prompt greets both the person calling and the person being called.
Thank you, sir.
Now, what does all that mean? Does that mean there's a separate phone line for attorney-client calls?
No, it's my understanding it does not work that way, Your Honor.
Then what is the telephone number you just referenced?
Oh, that is a service representative that can, let me just back up a minute if I may. In order to be placed on the private list, sometimes attorneys have to take steps to have their phone number added. We use, as I understand, Securus uses the Board of Bar Overseers listing of attorney phone numbers. Those all go on private right away. And then if there are additional numbers, as happened in this case, there were some cell phone numbers that were not on the board's website. We added those eventually. This prompt is a fail-safe in the event that that telephone number being called is not part of those numbers designated private, so as to stop people from having a privileged call and to make arrangements to have the number added to the private list.
And who does the addition to a private list?
I believe that Securus does that. There's an on-site technician named Shaheen Hernandez.
On-site where?
On-site, he was at South Bay at the time, and now he's at the jail.
So he works within the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department.
But he's a Securus employee, but he's inside the building.
And is it customary for counsel to be able to communicate directly with him and say, I'm attorney so-and-so, add my cell phone to the list, or is it a written request?
I'm not sure exactly how it works in all cases, Your Honor, but we did produce, there's some documentation in this case, it's SCSD number 38, and that was a letter from Attorney James Sultan to an assistant superintendent of the jail saying, here are the 3 cell phone numbers I'd like to add, and then Deputy Casey took it from there.
So an attorney is communicating with one of your administrative people?
Yes.
And your person, in turn, would deal with the Securus representative or forward it on?
Yes, I just don't know if people, if they know Shaheen, they may be able to just call him and say, I want to be added to this list. I just don't know. I don't have that knowledge, Your Honor.
And you indicated that the Sheriff's Office became aware of this improper accessing through some username installed at Securus TX,
Yes.
or Secure TX. And you became aware of that on July 21, 2014. How is it the Sheriff's Department became aware of that?
According to the email from Paul Vozella, it looks like he was monitoring. We can look and see who is in the database. Investigators, if you go into the database, you leave a footprint. And so that's something that investigators at SID have the right to look at.
And is this a database maintained by Securus or maintained by the Suffolk County Sheriff?
The database is maintained by Securus.
but you have access to it as it relates to pretrial detainees or inmates within your facility.
Yes, and also ICE detainees. That's the third class of people.
And do you know if it's possible for someone to access those records without leaving a fingerprint?
I don't think it's possible. That's what Securus explained to me, that every time someone goes in and accesses a call or records a call, it leaves a footprint.
And is that footprint part of what is produced in these records today?
The footprint left by both Medeiros and by installed TX is in the documents.
All right, anything further, counsel? No? Thank you, Mr. Forbes. You may step down. Mr. Leontine?
Sir, if I may very briefly before we call the next witness, I did get confirmation that the Department of Corrections uses Global Tel-Link and not Securus.
Thank you. Counsel?
Your Honor, I don't know the witness's name, but he's the technical individual from Suffolk County.
The technical person or the head of CID, SID?
Head of SID.
Mr. Dason.
Thank you.
Ms. Allen, swear the testimony you give in the matter now hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Counsel.
Please state your name for the record.
Yes, Brian Dacey.
And
Could you spell your last name, please?
D-A-C-E-Y.
And what is your current position with the Suffolk
I do.
Sheriff's Office?
I'm an assistant deputy superintendent. I oversee the sheriff's investigative division.
And what is your background, sir?
I've been an investigator for 24 years. Previously, I worked for the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office for 10 years, and I've been with the Sheriff's Department now for 13 and a half years.
Okay, so were you ever in uniform service?
I was not, no.
We were a detective, though, other than within the Sheriff's Office.
No,
Could you tell me, or tell the court, what technical training you have with respect to prison phone systems?
none. We have access to use the system, but nothing technical, no.
When you say we have access, could you tell the court who has access?
The investigators assigned to my division.
And how many of them?
Currently, there's 10 of us.
So 10 investigators have. And what do you investigate?
We investigate staff misconduct, severe staff misconduct, and criminal activity at the Sheriff's Department's facilities.
And if you come across information about potential criminal activity in the community, do you act upon that as well?
We strictly act on criminal activity within our facilities.
Well, let me ask you. You have the ability to listen to prisoners' phone calls, correct?
That's correct.
If you hear, and you have that ability to listen live as well?
We do, yes.
And do, in fact, on a regular basis, you and the members of your department listen live to prisoners' phone calls?
It's rare that we do.
It's rare. Does the system have a flag system that notifies you when a particular prisoner is having a phone call?
I don't know.
Do you review phone calls that have been taped already?
We do, yes.
And what is the purpose of that review?
For internal affairs purposes and criminal activity within the Sheriff's Department.
In the course of listening to those phone calls, if you were to discover that a particular inmate was planning a crime in the community, would you notify the local police of that potential criminal activity?
Typically, we speak with our general counsel's office prior to disseminating any type of information.
Okay. Do you provide the local police with that information after you speak with your general counsel's office?
There have been times, yes.
Is it not a regular practice within your department to provide information from listening to prisoners or detainees' phone calls to local police department.
No, it's not regulated.
Who runs the Securus system for Suffolk County?
It's maintained by Securus.
Who actually sits at the terminal?
We have investigators who have access to the system, the 10 I spoke about.
Do they have access to the system with a PIN code, user ID from outside of the facility?
No.
Let's make that clear if we can. Does that mean that you, I take it you have clearance,
I do, yes.
and you have a username or user ID of some sort?
That is correct.
Can you access this system from your home phone?
I do not.
Can you?
I believe we can. It's rare that we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you involved in the investigation with respect to the breach of Mr. Hernandez's phone calls?
I was made aware of the access to his calls.
Was Chief of Internal Affairs Investigations, would that not be within your purview?
As I said, I was made aware of it, yes.
Was somebody else in your department involved in the investigation?
Another investigator came upon the information and provided it to me.
How did he come upon that information?
He was reviewing the call detail history. Mr. Hernandez, and came upon the access levy.
How many detainees do you have in Suffolk County?
I don't know today's
5,000, 10,000?
I don't know. I think it averages around 700 to 800.
Do you review the call logs of all those prisoners?
No, not as a matter of routine, no.
Do you know why Mr. Hernandez's call log was reviewed at that time?
When Mr. Hernandez came into custody, we knew that he was a high-profile inmate. We know that there were some issues at Bristol County. We wanted to be sure that none of our staff were doing anything inappropriate.
What were the issues at Bristol County?
Just what I read in the media, that there were some photos leaked is my memory. I don't recall specifically.
How did that relate to checking his call logs?
We wanted to make sure we had no staff doing anything inappropriate with regards to Mr. Hernandez.
So staff could access without your knowledge, though?
No. There leaves a footprint, as Mr. Phillips testified.
Another question. Staff could be listening to phone calls, irrespective of whether a footprint was left or not, without authorization. Isn't that correct?
No, I don't believe so.
Do they have to come to you every time they want to listen to a call?
There's only certain staff members who are allowed access. They do not have to come to me as part of their duties.
So you testified earlier that 10 members of your department have access to Securus.
That's correct.
So it's not certain members, it's all the members. Correct?
Yes, but as
Right.
General Counsel Forbes testified, there are other members of the department who, through their gang intelligence unit, have access to the system as well, who are not under my purview.
Right. But with respect to you, your department, 10 members have access, and they don't have to come to you for approval to access the system, right?
That is correct.
How many members are there at the game unit?
I don't know a certain number, sir.
Hazard a guess? You ever see them in the jail?
I know 3.
Are you aware of any other departments that have access to the secure system?
I'm not.
Do you have any technical knowledge with respect to how the secure system operates?
No, not technical.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've concluded my report.
I'm welcome. Thank you, sir. Mr. Building and Town.
Your Honor, I don't know if the records are here from I guess they are. So if we could call the representative from Bristol County.
All right.
This way, sir. So you're going to stand right here, you're going to raise your right hand, you'll face the left side.
You solemnly swear the testimony you shall give in the matter now hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Right this way, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Could you state your name for the record?
First name is Nelson, last name is Degovea, D-E-G-O-U-V-E-I-A.
And what is your position with the Bristol County Sheriff's Department?
I'm the chief of Special Investigations for the Bristol County Sheriff's Office.
Did you produce documents today pursuant to the court's order?
Yes,
And you have those documents with you?
I do, sir.
Your Honor, can I take a brief moment to look and see what this is?
Let's see them. How big?
So this is the call detail log. It contains 95 pages of call detail, and it's from 6/28/2013 to 4/12/2015.
And are you aware of how this disc was created?
I am.
And how was it created?
Intelligence analyst that works in my office created it, Julie Oliveira.
But when you say she created, did she contact Securus to create it, or did she actually have access to the database?
No, she has access to the database and printed out the call detail log.
And that database is housed where?
Within the Bristol County Sheriff's Office.
You have a separate database. Is your database separate than the Securus database?
It's the Securus database. We just have access to it.
Right. But the actual server that contains the data is with Securus, is it
Yes,
not?
yes.
It's not within the jail?
No, it's with
Okay.
Securus.
So someone in your office contacted Securus and they prepared this disk for you, is that correct?
Yes.
No. And what else do you have?
And for the court, I have every single subpoena from both Bristol County and Superior County.
Oh. I don't think I'm going to need much time, Judge. I'll just in a second. May I show this, Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
Sir, could you tell us who's in charge of the, call it the Department of Phone Services at the Bristol County House Correction?
That ultimately comes under Superintendent Steve Souza. And ultimately the sheriff himself.
Okay, and Steve Souza is deputy superintendent?
He's the superintendent of all facilities.
All facilities. When you say facilities, functionally of the physical facilities, or does he have other responsibilities other than the physical facilities of Bristol County? How many deputy superintendents or superintendents are there?
Just one superintendent, sir.
Okay. So he's essentially the next in line after the sheriff, is that correct?
Yes.
And it's your testimony that he has direct supervision over the prisoner's telephone secure system?
Which then falls under me. I answer to the superintendent directly. So I have a total of, same thing, 14 investigators that have access to Securus.
And do they have live access as well?
Yes, they do.
And do they have access from locations other than at the jail?
It can be accessed, but like stated earlier, it would leave a footprint, and unless you have authorization, that doesn't happen.
Do you have a degree in forensics?
No, sir.
Do you have any scientific background at all in computer forensic analysis?
No, sir.
Do you have any programming experience?
No, sir.
What is your background, sir?
I've been in law enforcement for 27 years. I started inside the jail. I became a canine officer, went out throughout the ranks. I worked out with the drug task force, was assigned with DEA on multiple cases for a couple of years, and recently was promoted to this position.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Other than your investigative unit, which you said has approximately, what was it, 14? 14 individuals, are you aware who else has access to the secure system?
I would say that's about it, unless the superintendent has anybody that he has access to. But I would just say it's strictly within my unit.
How is access approved for an individual to, how does an individual get access to the secure system?
Well, you have to be assigned to a specialized unit, either SIU or to the drug task force or
Gang
unit.
and what then happens?
You receive this training, and then you receive a username and password, and you get your access.
And that username and password access comes from Securus?
Yes.
And are you aware if the gang unit has access to the system?
The gang unit is part of my SIU guys inside.
So
There's
14.
2 gentlemen, yeah, part of the 14.
And the drug task force unit?
They're part of the 14.
Have you ever seen a list of individuals who have access to the secure system?
I have not seen a complete list, no, sir.
And you know if the sheriff's office has a complete list of who has access?
I couldn't answer that. I'm sure we can produce a list through Securus.
Are you asking who has access from the Bristol County Sheriff's Department, or who has access worldwide?
That's a good question. I'm a little confused myself now. The question is who has access from the Bristol County Sheriff's Strike. I'm really trying to get at how do they get access? What's the procedure whereby one gets access to the secure system?
Well, when you get promoted to that specialized unit, and that person to complete their duties, their daily duties, will now receive the training and get access to the system.
Okay, and physically somehow Securus is notified of that?
Yes.
And when if that person were to leave, are you aware of a process whereby their access is revoked?
Yes, we would then contact Securus and tell them that that person is no longer doing those duties and their name is removed immediately.
Have you done that?
Yes.
With respect to attorney-client calls that are on the do not call list, is it possible to listen into those conversations live?
No. It's very difficult. Like stated earlier, the system, Securus, has a system in place that any attorney through the logbooks, it automatically is supposed to block out the inmate talking with the attorney. You can't even listen to it live. It automatically blocks you out. Now, if an attorney, for whatever reason, changes a number and it still hasn't been submitted, at that point, that's why that message in the beginning says hang up and call this number. It's a technical number for Securus to say, hey, I'm calling my attorney, but it's not privileged.
Are you aware whether or not attorneys who have been listed on the do not call list, whether their calls have in fact been recorded?
Can you repeat that?
Attorneys whose names are on the do not call list, are you aware of any time when their calls in fact were recorded?
I remember there might have been I wasn't in the office then, but I believe there was a situation with an attorney had given out his cell number, and that inmate had placed a call, and it was seized at that point, and both the attorney and the inmate were notified not to call cell numbers.
Well, the system doesn't, at the jail, doesn't require the inmates to put the call numbers that they want to make and get those call numbers approved by the jail?
The way it works, when you come in, you get booked in, and then there's a phone, and you're allowed a free phone call. At that point, you're allowed to enter up to 10 numbers yourself, and those are your 10 numbers that you're allowed to call.
So an inmate couldn't just pick up the phone and call anyone's cell phone. It would have to be on the list.
It's got to be part of that pre-approved.
Right. And in fact, the question that the incident that you just raised, that attorney-client privilege call was given to the grand jury, was it not?
I don't believe so, sir. I don't have an answer to that.
Was that a call in this case or in some other case?
No, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Completed my examination.
Commonwealth?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And counsel, we've received, I take it it's a disc of call recordings or call records. Has either side seen that disc?
No.
I'm sorry? Do you want to see them now?
There are 93 pages. I don't think I really have an opportunity to go through them.
I'm giving you the opportunity, if you want to look at them now, we can have this printed out, or we can continue, and you can look at them later. What would you prefer?
I'd like to look at them later.
Okay.
I don't even know what phone calls I'm looking for.
Very good. All right. What further, counsel?
Your Honor, I would just like to reiterate the question that was raised at the last hearing on the two motions. I understood the reason for granting the first motion with a reservation with respect to the second motion. I think that all the testimony today indicates what I tried to indicate to the court in the last hearing, that Securus is the only one who has the information that we believe we have an obligation to examine.
Which is what?
Which is like the 70,000 phone calls that were breached and 14,000 attorney calls included. Like the numerous cases where attorneys are listed on the do not call list and their calls are recorded. Securus has shown that its system has problems. And we want to forensically, and first of all, we don't even know, Judge, today, with this testimony, who breached the system. There was the defendant, the witnesses today couldn't testify as to who the breach, how the breach, who breached it. Now, number one. Number two, they can testify as to what they get from a printout from Securus, but they don't understand the underlying data. They have no access to the underlying data, the tapes that have been written over, reports, internal reports. So I would again like to renew my motion that we be allowed to continue with an examination of Securus based on the testimony that we heard today.
For what purpose?
For the purpose of understanding whether or not attorney-client privileged communications in fact were recorded and if in fact they have been accessed. That's the specific purpose.
All right. As I understand it, what we have received here from Bristol County and from Suffolk County is a record of every telephone call placed by Mr. Hernandez or under Mr. Hernandez's so-called PIN number. And I would expect that you have access to the telephone numbers used by counsel in this case, whether it be Mr. Sultan, Mr. Rankin, any of the current team, or any predecessor counsel since 2014. Finding attorney phone numbers is not difficult. The BBO would list them, Lawyer's Diary would list them. My question to you is, do you have any reason to believe that based upon a review of the call logs, there's any indication that any number associated with an attorney was in fact placed and was in fact recorded? I think from the witnesses we've heard here, those witnesses have no information reflecting intersections with counsel.
They have no information, period, about the Securus database. What has been testified to today and presented is double hearsay. We need to go to the source to determine. I think we have established foundation, as to the problems with attorney calling, client calls being recorded by Securus.
Well, you've referenced some article
No, sir, it's not just
that
an
was in
article.
a journal indicating that there was an improper breach of Securus's network that led to 14,000 telephone calls out of some number.
Well, I
think you said 70,000. I thought it was 70 million, frankly. 70
I also
billion.
referenced the master's report ordered by the federal judge in Kansas, which found that attorneys' calls were recorded even though they were on the do not call list. So it is not just an article.
But I've been told that that is not the case here as it relates to Suffolk and Bristol, according to the witnesses who have testified.
Who have no first-hand experience or knowledge of the Securus system or data, other than to call Securus and ask for a printout or a disk of the calls that were allegedly recorded.
So who would you want? Do you want, was it Mohammed, someone from Suffolk?
I don't believe Mohammed is the right person. I have the prior motion, Your Honor, that outlines the information that we would like from Securus.
Yes, and I've seen that, and much of that may be relevant to the civil suit that has now been filed. Is that against Securus? And that's filed here in the federal court? But it doesn't seem to have bearing on this case and this prosecution. So let's get back to telling me how this is relevant to this particular case. There's no allegation yet made that any attorney-client communication was accessed, listened to, or intended to be used by the prosecution in this case.
Judge,
and to the extent Bristol is somewhat connected because there was an overlap in time, I haven't heard any allegation that there was an improper accessing of attorney-client communications relating to the Bristol case.
Judge, this is
so it comes back to relevance. How is it relevant to this proceeding?
First of all, this isn't a suppression motion. This is a motion for discovery. I don't need to make allegations, specific allegations, with respect to reasonable basis to conduct discovery. We believe we know his phones were hacked. We still don't know who hacked them as a result of this hearing. We know Securus system has fallibilities with respect to attorney-client calls. We don't know if that has occurred in this system. The witnesses here simply do not have the capacity to testify to that. And we think we have an obligation to look into whether or not Mr. Hernandez's, number one, how the breach occurred and who breached it, and number two, that could have been a law enforcement official as far as we know. I'm not saying it was, but it could have been. Are we supposed to just ignore that because I can't make the specific allegation?
Well, I thought we'd heard the testimony that it was someone affiliated with Securus. That we have a username or ID or some account name of install at secure, which is believed to be someone connected to that end of the business.
Or it could be a Russian hacker, with all respect, like WikiLeaks, who was able to backdoor into the system and understand how to create a username in order to enter the secure system. We don't know.
And if you do know, then what? How does that advance the ball in this case?
If we do know, if we learn, let me put it this way, that it was, for example, a law enforcement official who hacked his calls, or if we learn that in fact Securus does in fact take attorney-client privilege calls, irrespective of the do not call criteria, and those calls have been accessed.
By whom?
They can be accessed by the sheriff office or anyone else. Because if they're theoretically on the do not call list and they're supposed to be blocked, yet they're recorded, that's obviously a failure in the system that is supposed to prevent that from happening. So we want to know two things. And I think it's relevant. One.
Well, hold on. Let's follow the thread you were just developing.
Okay.
Because it all comes back to improper accessing or improper use in some way by the prosecution.
When you say
or the prosecution team, including any agents, any police, any investigators associated with the prosecution in this case.
You're correct.
Okay. So the relevance is tying it back to a broad claim, in this case, of prosecutorial misconduct, right, in the broadest terms.
In the broadest terms.
And so we turn to Mr. Hagan and inquire whether or not the Commonwealth, in the broadest terms, has had access to or received or is aware of any attorney-client communications through either Bristol County or Suffolk County or in any system maintained by Securus that has come to your attention or into your possession.
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Hagan, in speaking that response, you understand you're speaking for the broadest prosecutorial unit here, to include police officers under your supervision.
Yes, Your Honor. May we push sidebar briefly?
You may.